Ladies and gentlemen, friends, colleagues and listeners, here we are again, another session of our Turbulence review of the book written by David Banmiller, a 50-year veteran. And my God, sir, you're looking well today. You've obviously had a nice trim up and you're looking lovely. And if you can let everybody know where you're speaking from.
Well, people are going to be jealous, but I'll just throw it all out there, okay?
That's it.
I'm in Palm Springs at a place called The Vintage, which is supposedly the best country club in America. Depends upon who you talk to. But the clientele, I won't list them, but they're the top of the very interesting people, including some professional golfers. But it's 75 and sunny. We've got a pool outside, jacuzzi. I've been working out every day, and I've been here a week now. The jet lag's gone, and you can eat. I got my first vaccine Friday. The hospital came to me on the list and said, pick a time and pick a date. And so I got the first. I'm getting the second one. I'm eating outdoors. Indoors is going to be pretty soon. So it's like really normal and beautiful weather. So I'm sorry for you folks, particularly my good friends in Ireland, that don't have this opportunity right now. But we're in a good place, Chris.
Obviously, I'm pleased for you, but my God, mate, I'd love to be there as well. I'd love to be there. Holy mother of Moses. And I can't wait. I can't wait to get out to a restaurant, which please God, it's going to be coming soon because, things are looking much, much, much better now here in the UK. So
well, we got the Pfizer vaccine here. There was a couple of, we got the Pfizer, which I think is maybe the best. Depending on who you talk to.
Be careful there, David. We don't want to be doing any casting.
Oh yeah. I take it back. I didn't say it. Zip.
Yeah,
never said
it. Lovely. No, I think anybody who's got any sense whatsoever, get your vaccine as quick as possible, no matter which one it is, because the percentages far outweigh anything that anybody's saying at the moment. So. But how do you feel? You feel good after the first one, huh?
Yeah, it's interesting. Arm was sore the second day. Not a big deal. I mean, not even worth talking about. The third day, I felt awful. I mean, my muscles ached. I was tired. And the jet lag was over, so it wasn't that. So, yeah, I had, let's say, a mild reaction as opposed to maybe some others. But just one day, and I was fine. And they're very, very well organized. So it's
but psychologically, it makes you feel better, doesn't it?
Of course it does. I'm still going to do the social distancing, wear the mask, be responsible. Plus, a lot of people don't know that I've had the jab. So in fairness to them, you know what I mean? Just because I've got it doesn't mean I shouldn't be sensitive to other folks. So I'm going to continue with that for the foreseeable future.
No, exactly. I think some of the practices and some of the concerns, they're going to make people be a lot more wary now moving forward.
I should mention, when we came over on British Airways, they have this system. You go on their website, and I wasn't sure it was some kind of weird technology idea. Anyhow, we went on, we filled it out. We took a picture of the test 3 days before.
Yeah.
They downloaded the picture, and it's on your phone. And I went to the gate agent. I said, do you understand this thing? Here it is. And she said, does it have a green check? I said, yes. She said, you're good to go. That's it. It was so slick. And that's before the next step, which is going to be some sort of passport card. Yeah. Like when I got the first jab, I have a card.
Yep.
And that card I have to save, and they have the number of what I got. The second one's going to have a batch number.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to laminate that. And then they'll probably start having airlines download that.
Yep.
And then I think the final thing is going to be, in my opinion, which makes sense, is some sort of passport. And you may have heard it because I read the UK papers too, that they're talking about access to pubs and restaurants with that passport. So there's all kinds of technology enhancements that are going to affect positively this travel and tourism and leisure market morass that we're in.
No, I agree. Yeah, the travel pass and the passport ideas, I think that was inevitable. And as people are more concerned about whether they can or they can't, people want to protect their business and their livelihoods. I think they're the ones who'll be making a choice by saying, look, anybody who comes into this establishment, you have to have this before you come in. And then whether it's on a QR code or whether they've got, you know, little pods or whatever, that's the way it'll be in the future. That's my opinion. And anybody who doesn't want to do it, they'll have to rely on the, you know, the PCR test or the lamp testing, and then they'll have to do short-term testing to go into facilities. So there'll be differences of types of venues, I think, but thank God it's coming because it's going to help everybody.
Here's an interesting point before we get into the pricing and scheduling. Have you read or heard of any cockpit or cabin crew members having COVID?
No. Obviously, cabin staff, crew, I have, but that's because mainly of, you know, where they've been and where they are, and they're meeting with somebody.
They're not getting it on the airplane.
No, the aircraft. I mean, the aircraft itself. You know, people always say, "Oh, you're always catching colds and you catch it on it." But the filtering, the HEPA filtering system in an aircraft is not far off what you have in an operating theatre. It's incredible. It's all the touch points before, unfortunately, for the legacy carrier, which is why private aviation is getting such a big boost at the moment, because you've got less interaction, less touch points, and anybody who's got enough disposable, they're thinking to themselves, well, you know, why not do something a little bit different and you know, and look after myself and my family a little bit more. So that's how it's coming back now. But my God, the scientists and what they're able to do, God bless them. You can only imagine what it would be like now.
How long it took Jonas Salk, to come up with a cure for polio?
Yeah.
Years.
Yeah. And look at the way they celebrated that. And I think that's the only difference with, you know, with generations. You know, sometimes we expect too much, and then we criticize too much, and we don't, you know, give enough gratitude for it.
Well, and let's face it, there's not a politician on earth that can come out of this okay, because no matter what avenue you take, who you hire, whether you're opening schools or not, whether you're traveling or not, it's an impossible job. And I think if I were a politician, which I kind of am sometimes because I have to be, I would stand in front of the podium and say, guys, one thing I can assure you, I do not know.
Yeah.
Okay. You get it? I don't know. Yeah. I'm going to hire the best and the brightest. We're going to take the best shot we can. And at the end of the day, we're going to make some mistakes.
Yeah.
There it is.
No, you're 100% right. And I think you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. Whatever happens, everybody was jumping into the unknown. And I think the only thing, though, David, that I would say is that they should have focused more on data-driven decision rather than date and economy-driven decisions, because too many of them overcommitted because of pressures and not realizing the impact of what would happen if there was a second wave, which there was, and then the subsequent lockdowns. So they should have been tougher earlier and only come out of it with decisions, you know, that were data driven, not commitment or pressure or press motivated.
You know what I call it? Leadership.
Yep. But equally, you know, there's been some good things have come out now, and it also shows sometimes the ability to be agile, resilient, and to be able to pivot subject to the pressures, which we've spoken about. And some of the larger, shall we say, organizations and people that were so focused on growth, and then even with governments and countries, part of the European Union and everything, if there's too much say, there's too much indecision. And sometimes you're better off just saying, right, we're doing this, we'll measure it. If it happens this way, we go left or we go right, and let everybody feel that they're aware ahead of time.
When I took over Aloha, they had no money. In fact, they had 25 million in checks, but they couldn't mail them. And this was a $500 million company with, you know, thousands of employees. And my one deal with the board was very simple. There is only one commander in chief. We're at war. And I'll listen to the board, but there's going to be no favoritism between board members, politics, jockeying. Yeah. You got one commander in chief where this won't work. End of story.
That's it. I totally agree with you. And the trouble is bloody hindsight. And it's ironic that it's 2020, the year that everything went wrong. It's very easy to pick holes after the event, but you know, when you're under pressure and you're not sure what's going to happen next, you know, I've got a lot of respect for everybody who's got through it. So, you know, good luck to them. So now, sir, now we're going to go, we're now on chapter 6, which is our 7th session, and a great combination. So the dynamic duo, pricing and scheduling. So, you know, two of the most important elements in airline operations, you know, in terms of logistics, obviously profitability, and most importantly, and a word that everybody's using now, sustainability. So, you know, you got pricing, you got scheduling. So I think we'll start with scheduling, David. So what I just want to ask you is, you mentioned in the book about having, you know, it's a 4-dimensional approach. So, you know, what affects the future scheduling has on costs. You've got staffing issues, you've got competition factors, and you've got customer demand. So,
and then I would throw in, Chris, and I'm not sure why I didn't say it before, maintenance.
yeah,
Because those airplanes have a very, very precise maintenance schedule. And a lot of the requirements you can't miss. I mean, they're like required checks.
yeah, no, 100%, 100%. So now with those 4 areas in place, okay, and if you've, you know, if you're looking back on your experiences and also the challenges for the people that were involved in scheduling, and it's ironic because it's pretty evident today. You look at the amount of schedules that people have had to change, with countries going onto the red list, thinking that they're going to come back, thinking they're going to have a schedule. Are they having a schedule? Are they not? There's always been a little bit of them and us between scheduling and operations, you know, traditionally within the industry. But now, you know, it's a minefield for everybody.
I can't imagine how difficult scheduling is. And let me give you kind of a background. First of all, typically airlines are working on schedules years in advance for a couple of reasons. Retired airplanes, new airplanes on order, demand changes, all the different elements that you can imagine in an environment where you're trying to affect supply and judge demand and what the competition is doing. But typically you nail it down 330 days, which is the exact number of days in advance, and your schedule's pretty much set. Now it's a nanosecond. These scheduling folks, I can't imagine what they're going through. And let me give you a personal example. We were trying to get to Palm Springs for the past 2 months scheduling. I mean, we planned on coming, you know, in March. 4 different flights were canceled. British Airways used to fly 10 or 15 times a day, London, Dublin, twice a week now.
Yeah.
And then you're stuck at Heathrow for 5 or 6 or 7 hours before your next leg. We've been canceled 4 times. And we were fortunate. We decided to go over Dallas and then come in on American. But people that don't really understand the industry and how to search and say, okay, this is canceled, let's try this. What's the best schedule? Like the West Coast. LA is dominant for British. They canceled San Francisco for several months, period, to London, right? But I said, they're going to keep LA. They need a strong West Coast somewhere, and LA is the best. And they've kept LA. The guys that are scheduling right now, what we typically look at, of course, is demand and supply. We say, okay, 30, 60, 90 days out, what does it look like? That's more on the pricing side. The scheduling side, regardless of what consumers used to think, oh, it wasn't full, so the airline canceled. You and I both know it's been years, other than right now, when airlines said, oh, the load factor is 60%, cancel and combine flights. You just don't do it because it affects the marketplace, your integrity, crew scheduling. The airplane, if it's going somewhere, is coming back, so it might be full coming back, all kinds of complications. So you have stability in schedule, and then the price comes in to determine how many seats you're going to allocate on those flights. And you might change equipment. You might say, oh, let's put a bigger airplane on this one. All that, all out the window. All out the window. Right now, the flight we took over, 787, London, Dallas, holds 220 some odd seats on the 787, 52 people.
Yeah.
52. Coming back, 15.
I know, it's incredible. It's terrible, huh? And that, obviously the ghost flight principle is you know, it's just
and then
shocking.
Chris,
Shocking.
when you when you think about, we tend to think about the consumer and the demand because that's what people think, right?
Yeah.
Crew scheduling, duty rigs, right airplane at the right place. Is that the right airplane for its next scheduled maintenance? Where's it going to be?
Yeah.
All these other factors, in addition to the demand itself,
Yep.
have to be considered. So you're this grand wizard. It's kind of like the Wizard of Oz, the guy behind the screen that's pulling all the levers.
Yeah.
That's the scheduling guy today. He probably doesn't have any hair anymore because he's pulled it all out.
Yeah. But and another thing that you just mentioned there as well, are you using the right plane for the right reasons in the right place? And if you look at pre-COVID, I mean, so many of the signs were on the wall where you had 380s and 747s doing such short legs, and just to get them up in the air, the cost is phenomenal. And then also, like you said, on the maintenance side, the impact is incredible. But and you look at it and you think, my God, why would you use such a plane like that for such a short distance?
There's no really good reason. As an example, in Jamaica, we had Kingston and Montego Bay were only 20 minutes apart by flight. And we had the A340, which is a wide-bodied airplane. But because of the uniqueness of the slots in London at Heathrow, we had to combine the two cities.
Yeah.
So we would take that 20-minute short haul, cost us an arm and a leg. Just be able to pick. That's an unusual situation. Typically, short haul are smaller airplanes for all the obvious reasons.
Yeah.
10% of the fuel that is put on an airplane carries the fuel.
Yeah.
So it's an extremely expensive enterprise. So the fuel burn issue and the cycle, as for some that might not be aware, part of your leasing is cycles. A cycle is a landing and a takeoff.
Yeah.
So if you're landing and taking off every 20 minutes versus once every 10 hours, the cost and the fatigue and the landing gear cost and the engine cost are all varied by cycles.
Yep. And it's like I said, for anybody who, again, we've mentioned, I think, on several times, when somebody's sitting on that aircraft, everybody virtually, doesn't matter whether they've traveled all their life or not, they still get a buzz when you get on an airplane. It's just something that's nice. It's you, and you got peace and quiet in most cases. You can watch your video, your film, you can do a bit of work, you can have a bit of relaxation. It's a lovely experience. But when you look out the window and you see some of the things going on, it's very easy to forget or not even to appreciate so many other things that go on in all these spheres that are around that plane taking off and landing. It's incredible.
Yeah, you mentioned a funny word, just to throw in a little levity here. You get a buzz when you get on the airplane. Every once in a while, some people have too much of a buzz.
Yeah.
I can tell you some stories about drunk passengers,
Oh yeah. And dare I say, there's going to be a lot more of that when everything comes back. But let's hope it's done in the best possible taste, as they say. Now, something else which I thought was really good and really funny. You were talking in the book about the transition or the steps of how scheduling and pricing was influenced, and then you talk about being back in the 70s, and it was more of a the lens was on marketing and how that changed. But one of the things that you mentioned in there, which I thought was a great story, was the one about Terrell Drinkwater, the CEO of Western Airlines. I thought that's a lovely story about the Queen Mary.
And it still applies today. And his comment was, and he was talking about the 707s. Can you imagine the 380s, but the 707s. And he said, what routes we apply is important. You wouldn't fly from San Francisco, to a very, very short haul, let's say Reno. And then he equated that to the Queen Mary being used in Lake Tahoe.
Yeah.
And it was a great example because it doesn't work functionally. It doesn't work economically. It obviously doesn't work. So it was a great example. And he said that back in the 70s with the 707. Can you imagine what it is like today when you're trying to figure out hubs and spokes?
Oh, my God.
And the 380 and the 74 and the feeders and the schedules and how you manage those. And pricing gets into play as well, because Let me throw out an example now while it's on my mind. Would you fly on American from Tulsa to Dallas and then on to London? The computer knows how many people 30 days out are average going to go to London from Tulsa. Let's call it 10.
Yeah.
On average, by day of the week, by time of the year. Literally all that information is captured. So then you forecast, we're going to have 10 people in Tulsa going to London Friday. So the flight from Tulsa to Dallas, which is a smaller airplane, narrow-bodied airplane, might leave 10 seats open because they're holding those seats for the connection to London. I think we called it at the time virtual nesting, but it's really a yield management function.
Yeah.
Where you're trying to get the most revenue on those city pairs.
Exactly. And I think if you were to list or to put in a table all the permutations, considerations, risks, opportunities, priorities that have to be taken into account, it would blow people's minds.
And there's still human intervention because there's the combination of technology today, which can forecast based upon historical data going back like 25 years, what's going to be like Wednesday before Thanksgiving, every day for 25 years on this city pair.
Yeah.
And then, so you have that model, but at some point you still have a human being where the info pops up and the yield management person says, let me look at a couple of other numbers and let's decide, should we drop the fare to fill up the seats, or is it going beyond the curve? So let's raise the fares. And they're 30, 60, 90 days out. So there's a combination of computer involvement, very, very heavy these days, and some element of human behavior. Of course, human beings designed the intellectual technology in the first place. But then at some point, a person comes on and says, let's add seats, drop seats, change the fare. I think of all the things that are involved in this industry and all the elements I've been involved in, pricing and scheduling is dear to my heart because it is so important for revenue generation and cost control.
Yeah, no, you're right. But the thing, I just find it so sad now, Dave. Okay, that you look on LinkedIn, you see all these messages, and you see a 380 being retired. Obviously, the Queen of the Skies, the 747s being retired, and those great big huge aircraft that were so lovely to get on and experience, and the luxury and the comfort and everything, and now they're being put, they're just being put out to pasture. It's really hard to fathom, and also the companies that were so quick to sign them up and order them, and now to be having so many of them and have the business change so much, and the changes are going to last for quite a while now. It's just an amazing thing.
Do you remember the old L1011s and DC10s?
Yeah.
Where the three engines, in the back. PSA, our arch competitor on the West Coast, put in some L1011s between San Diego and Los Angeles.
Yeah.
That is a very short haul, right?
Yeah.
And between San Diego and San Francisco. And what they did was they put in a piano bar. So one section of there, the guys would be drinking, having fun, playing the piano. It never worked economically. They ultimately stopped doing it. But even Continental, back in the day, they carved out part of the airplane for piano and an open bar and that sort of thing. And you could do that on the wide body, DC-10, L-1011, 747. But those days are gone. And they probably weren't economical then. They certainly aren't economical now.
Yeah. There's been so many things, from, I remember being on Virgin, and having a massage on board, and you could have how do they put it? You could have a relaxing one or an invigorating one. So if you wanted to stay up and do some work, you got the rougher one. And if you wanted to go to sleep, you got a lovely relaxing one. But, things like that. And then having the bars at the back. And, unfortunately, if your seat was too close to the bar and the bar was very popular, get a lot of noise.
Yeah,
But
yeah, it's
so
true.
many different things, and then you look at Etihad with the, like the apartment in the sky, and beautiful accommodation and innovation there, and with the big aircraft now going, it's such a shame. It's incredible. Now, on the deciding your fleet, which is something that I know that you really enjoyed. So, knowing your planes, knowing your forecast. But the one thing that people weren't able to know is what sort of external influencing factors were coming. So if you look at all the things that have happened roughly every 8 or 9 years in our industry, there's always been a major challenge for us to overcome. And thank God, that's one of the things about the industry. The agility and the resilience and being able to pivot under pressure has been fantastic. But those sort of pressures, David, do you know what I'm saying? You can do the right thing for the right reasons, and then suddenly the wrong external factor will come, and it makes it look like a crock of, proverbial.
It's not like buying a car. If you want to go to buy a car, and a lot of the car lots now are next to each other. So they're kind of like, and you go in there and you look at the Mercedes, you look at the Audi, you look at them, maybe drive them around, and you drive it off the lot, right?
Yeah.
With an airplane, you got to buy slots years in advance. You got to say, okay, what's it going to be like 3 years from today, 4 years from today, 5 years? I think with all the trouble that Boeing's had, I think the order for the 787s, I don't think you can get a new one off the line now for probably 2, 3, 4 years. I think. I don't know that as a fact, but I know it's probably not tomorrow morning. And then the leasing companies came in years ago, and at first Boeing didn't want to give airplanes to leasing companies. They wanted to give them to the airline themselves. But as time and economics and financing and so on went forward, leasing companies got a lot of money from institutions like insurance companies that bring in a lot of cash and need depreciation of assets to improve their P&Ls, right? So what do? They get a $200 million airplane or $100 million airplane, and then they lease that, so it's on the books. They get the revenue, and then if the return conditions, which they always are pretty tough, you get a pretty good airplane for 5, 10, 15, 20, maybe 30 years. The typical first lease is 5 to 7 years, and then you go through extensions. So that dynamic changed dramatically. We used to go like you buy a house. You used to go to the bank and borrow the money, and your asset was the airplane.
Yeah.
And then the Steve Hozzies of this world, and there's a few others now, just recently announced that there's this merger between GE that's trying to divest themselves of a bunch of their businesses, now including just last week, their leasing company, and they're combining it with a leasing company out of Dublin, Ireland.
Yeah.
Where I live, and they're going to have 2,000 airplanes. They're going to be the biggest in the world. And the leasing business now is so much different than even the leasing companies when they started.
Yeah.
And you have all the different multiple types, and you find, just as an aside, leasing companies generally won't take a new airplane off the line. They want to get its sea legs for 6 months to a year before they get in line. But think about the purchasing power of a company that can go to Boeing and Airbus and order 200 airplanes at once, and pick the engines.
Phenomenal.
A lot of power.
Another little tick on the box there for Ireland. When you look at Dublin and Ireland as the heartland of aircraft aviation leasing, I mean, it's incredible the amount of business that goes through Ireland on leasing.
Biggest in the world, biggest location in the world, Dublin, Ireland.
Yeah,
by far.
Yeah, no. Amazing. Now, another thing, right? So with with scheduling, and you have to decipher the journey purpose, and then you've got things like curfews, slots, your own location. So whether you're an island-based airline or you're landlocked or whatever it is, and then the hub and spoke, and whether it's short haul, long haul, there's so many different combinations and decisions that have to come into it. What would you say was the most challenging exercise you ever had to have, or you ever faced?
It was probably, there's so many of them, but one just stands out quickly, and that is slots. Now, what most people don't know is every 6 months, the airlines of the world send their scheduler, if he still has hair, we talked about that earlier, to a place, and every place is different. I went to one when I was VP International for American, and we had it in Budapest. So the hotel has all these rooms, and each airport, Heathrow, Frankfurt, Tel Aviv, Narita, which is a story I want to tell, they have their scheduler sitting in the room, and you have an appointment. This goes on for 3 or 4 days.
Yeah.
Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. I went with a friend of mine who was chief legal counsel for the FAA because we had some issues with slots in Orange County. But in addition, Narita. So I went in front of with our scheduler, who was the prime guy. I was sort of the secondary guy. And we used to call her the Dragon Lady. She had these long nails, and she controlled the slots at Narita. Now that's gold. Okay. I mean, Narita, this is before they added some other airports and so on, but it was like gold. So at American, we had 5 slots a week.
Yeah.
You'd like to have 7, right? So we're trying to get the other 2 slots. So I'm talking to this lady. I'm trying to charm her, which went pretty much nowhere. And her badge said, it didn't say that she worked for Narita Airport. It was like ANA.
Yeah.
And it said, well, wait a minute. I don't understand. I thought you work independently. She said, oh, we do. I said, well, who pays your check? Oh, well, ANA or JAL. She might have been the JAL person, Japan Airlines. So then I go to the next one, and it's Frankfurt. And we're sitting down with the main scheduling person controlling all the slots at Frankfurt. Pretty important deal, right? His badge said Lufthansa.
Yeah.
And I said, who pays your salary? So we're trying to negotiate with people that theoretically are supporting their own business. So what we did a deal. Went like this. We needed those 2 slots at Narita. So I went to our FAA guy who was with me, very good friend of mine, Ed Faberman. I said, Ed, I got an idea. Let's go to JAL. They need a slot at O'Hare. We know this. See, this stuff goes on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
You know, over a drink or something, you whisper to the guy at JAL, hey, if you give me this, I'll give you that, right? That's what we did. We cut a deal with JAL to get a couple slots at O'Hare, and we got our 2 slots at Narita. Now, that is happening all the time, but the average consumer doesn't have a clue about something as simple that. Now throw in Heathrow.
Yeah.
Now, I had the opportunity to visit with Willie Walsh just a couple of years ago. And up in his office, he overlooks the runways, and he was describing to me the additional runway that's been political for so long, and they really need it, and so on and so forth. And it was fascinating just listening to his side as the CEO of British Airways about slots and what he has to do to try to optimize his slots and his use at Heathrow. Now, when I was at Air Jamaica, we had slots at Heathrow, very, very valuable slots. When I left to go to Aloha, somebody, and I won't go into the details, sold those slots for, I think it was like 10 million. I can tell you back then it was worth 30 million. I mean, the slots are incredibly expensive. And then some folks, particularly those that are noise sensitive folks, the folks that weren't living there when the airport was built, moved in and said, wow, there's an airport here. I don't like the noise.
Yeah.
Anyhow, they dusted up a bit and said, well, why don't you airlines change your fare structure so that we'll give you cheap landing slots at 3 o'clock in the morning, not 10 in the morning, where everybody's coming in from overseas, right? It's cheaper at 3 in the morning than it is at 10. It's like the story I tell that Crandall talked about with pricing. If you want to go have dinner at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you'll probably get an early bird special, but at 7:30, you're going to pay the rack rate.
Yeah.
It was the same thing with scheduling. That's the kind of thought process that schedulers have to deal with every single day around the world. This slot meeting is every 6 months. And I can't imagine what it's like today, by the way, because with COVID, people are trying to preserve the slots. And some are saying, well, wait a minute, you're not using those slots because it is a use it or lose it
Yeah, but that's why,
timeframe.
thankfully, the waiver has been extended, and it makes a lot of
Yes.
sense, because otherwise you've got the ghost flights and you're wasting even more money, and it's crazy. So thank heavens there's a bit of common sense there. But,
Every once in a while.
yeah. Now another story, David, is the one where you're talking about, how critical things were, and what you did was to visualize. You put the actual planes on the table, and then you decided which plane for the most high demand route. And then we've also got the issue of the 13 million payback, when you actually went round and you gave checks to employees.
Well, in the early 80s, we, AirCal and PSA, we were all in financial difficulties. And I came over from TWA because of my big airline experience. 78 was deregulation. So that's the credentials that I brought with me. I was running stations and then marketing and some other jobs. And then it was acquired by General Lyon, two-star general, and George Argis, both extremely wealthy guys, wonderful people, by the way. And they looked at things differently. They looked at it with common sense. So here we are broke, and they'd just taken it over, and we're trying to retain slots in Orange County. Americans trying to get the slots. They end up buying us and getting the slots years later, kind of ironic. So Bill, who is a very strategic thinker, said, okay, first of all, let's take everything off the table, and we've got bills to pay. So let's just separate the invoices. Okay, we need airplanes, leasing costs. We need fuel. We need pilots to fly them. So let's just prioritize, and these other things, we'll talk to vendors and say, give me a break, we'll pay you sometime. Then we went out and made presentations to all the unions. And I was kind of like the point guy. And I made presentations to the unions. I've done so many of these things over the years, I could do it in my sleep now, because with so many airlines, you get the pilots, flight attendants, crew, and particularly the pilots, because they're the toughest to deal with. They're also the most fun, I got to tell you, because they really challenge you. At the end of the day, we sort of want the same thing, but you got to go through the fascination to get there. So we said to all the employees, we need a 10% salary cut. Every employee, management on down, everybody. But we'll pay you back. Nobody believed us, by the way.
Eventually.
We'll pay you back. I became the head of marketing, and I don't take all the credit for this, but maybe I'll take a little bit.
Yeah.
I changed the pricing strategy. I fired the ad agency. We did a lot of different things. We decided to fly LA, San Francisco, because General Lyon said to the marketing guy before me, why aren't we flying LA, San Fran? And he gave some obtuse excuse. He was formerly with United, and he thought differently. And Bill said, what's the biggest city pair on the West Coast? LA, San Francisco. So why aren't we flying the biggest city pair with the best population? I don't care who's flying. So we put in 10 or 12 flights a day. We added marketing. Anyhow, so we turned the company around in only 2 years, by the way. And we took the company public. We had a party for the employees in the hotel in Orange County Airport. We had a check that's about 10 feet long or something.
Yeah.
Covered up on a podium. George, Bill, and I were the three exec, chairman, co-chairman, president. And in front of thousands of people, we unveiled the check, 13.8 million, whatever the number. I still have the check somewhere, the actual physical check.
You still got it?
The big one. You couldn't cash it. You couldn't get in the
no, of course,
the bank with it.
You still got the big, because it's huge.
Yeah. So in the back of the room, we had staff. If your letter were A or B or C, your last name, you stand in this file, and we'd hand you a check. Here's your check, Dave, or here's your check, Chris. Some of them were $10,000, $15,000. They couldn't believe it. And then General Lyon and I took his private jet and flew all around all the cities in the West Coast. And we'd go into the lunchroom in Sacramento with the employees, and we personally hand the ramp guy and the ticket agent their check for thousands of dollars. And I remember one guy told me later, he said, our arch rival, PSA, we kidded them. We said, hey, did you guys get a check for all the things that you did. Well, I just got a check for 4,000. Where's your check? It gave them an awful lot of pride, and it's a true story. And I'll bet you will rarely find that anywhere else. You might find something like that under Jerry Grinstein at Delta when he came out, and Jerry's reward was 10 million, and he wouldn't take the money.
He divided it. Yeah.
He gave it back to the employees. But that was a remark. You had to be there to experience the drama. The TV stations were there.
It must have been one of the nicest things to be able to do.
Phenomenal.
The people and see their faces and the difference it makes. But the check is a huge thing. I'm just looking down at it now. $11,593,000, and then I like what it was written. It says the who to, so it's the employees of Aircal.
Yeah.
But what a lovely, lovely thing to be able to do, huh?
You won't find that in this industry. It's very, very rare. And we said we were going to do it. With their help, we did it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That really is. Now, another area that people, it's always a talking point, and sometimes it's something that you hope that people don't talk about. But a classic is when somebody is sitting next to somebody else and they might be really pleased with the deal they've got, and then all of a sudden somebody says, well, why am I paying more than him or her? And I'm sitting next to them. We're getting the same, we're getting the same service, the same whatever. So when you book it, all those areas come into it. But and also the choice now, the choices that people have to make to what they want. So, when they bundle or when they filter what's necessary for their likes and dislikes. But the basics are, no matter whether somebody is buying what they consider to be cheap or what they consider to be expensive, you definitely need to have good food. You need to have good legroom, good comfort, on-time departure, and obviously on-time arrival. And timely bag arrival is so important, because if everything else goes well, and then the blooming bags take so long to get to the belt, it drives people crazy. You can see them visually getting so stressed out just because of that particular area. And obviously the most important thing is that you arrive safely. But with all that bundling now and choice definition, the pricing is such an incredible tool still, even though at this moment in time now, some of the pricing strategies are going to be so influential as to how the business bounces back, and also the stability and the sustainability of the bounce back. Because if the pricing stays too low, then all of the knock-ons to all the handling companies and everybody else, that's also going to have another big pressure point on the entire business. So I'm hoping that there'll be a more realistic pricing, and that in the main, things are going to be, I'm not saying I want it, because obviously I'm a traveler myself, but I think the prices need to be a lot more realistic than they were before COVID, because some of those prices were crazy.
Well, let me give you a couple of little thought processes. They're different, but they kind of come together at the end. I want to talk about bundling. I want to talk about baggage fees. I want to talk about how we got there.
Yeah.
But right now, because of COVID, cancellation fees have been relaxed, and that sort of thing. So there's an environment today, and some people aren't getting refunds fast enough, and that's its own story because of the shortage of cash. And it is what it is. But that's not what I want to talk about. What I want to talk about is the old versus the new versus the future. The old was, you went in, you bought a ticket from a travel agent from LA to New York. He got 10%. And basically, let's say you took a coach fare, first class was a little bit more, and off you went. And that was the fare. And it might be a little bit different depending upon time of year and demand and that sort of thing. But that was it. And then guys like Southwest and certainly now Ryanair said, well, wait a minute, let me figure this out. And we started to do it at AirCal, but we weren't as smart as Michael Leary, I'll have to tell you, at least I wasn't. So they said, well, wait a minute, the airplane's going from A to B. We need so much revenue in the airplane. Now, if Chris and Dave are flying, and Chris has no bags, and he's only going for a day, and he doesn't want to eat, and he doesn't want anything for free, and he'll buy the ticket 3 months in advance, so you sort of get the cash early. Chris ought to get a better deals. But Dave wants to go at the last minute. He needs that meal because when he gets there, he's not going to have time to eat. He's taking 3 bags because one of the bags is stuff for his mother-in-law, whatever.
Yeah.
So, and that's weight on the airplane, and that's fuel. And then if you talk to a human being, the airline's paying the human being, whether it's reservations, whether it's check-in, whatever it is. So if you say, okay, you're very, very price conscious, go on the computer. I don't have to pay anybody. The computer will do your reservation, print out your boarding card. You don't have to see a human being. Don't take any bags or one bag, and no free food. You're not going to pay the same as the guy next to you. Now, to me, and I've had this argument with people, I said, you now understand when we unbundle, the consumer wins. And this argument about baggage fees, it hit the Congress, for heaven's sakes.
Yeah,
People were saying, oh, airlines are making 5% of their profits are baggage fees. They don't think beyond that to say, well, wait a minute. A, you don't have to take 3 bags. I mean, you can economize yourself. B, fuel costs. C, cargo space in the airplane. If it's all bags, you can't carry cargo. And of course, you appreciate the air freight part of that story and the mail part of that story. So from an economic point of view and a fairness to the consumer point of view, unbundling and separating them, everybody wins. But then people will be on television on the night shows arguing about baggage fees, and they don't have any idea what they're talking about.
Yeah. Let me ask you something, Dave. Now, and I know you love marketing, right? Now, I think every single trip that I've ever done, apart from when you get the perfect storm, so to say, that everything runs as you'd love it to, but really quickly. But when you've got a bit of time, so if you're in a security queue, or if you're in the queue to get through to the gates, or if you've got to go through a secondary security, or if you're just waiting, the amount of time that you actually have to get more and better information, plus when you get on the aircraft, why on earth does the industry itself collectively not do like a documentary of, how your seat, your meal, your aircraft, your crew, your maintenance teams, your finance teams, your marketing, how they put that whole trip together and what goes into it, so that people have got a better appreciation of the actual travel formula or the ingredients. And especially now more than ever, because people are so focused now on supply chain and how things keep going, and they can't wait to get back now and make memories. I just don't understand why we never do it, because I look at some of the screens when I'm in a queue and I think, why don't you put something interesting up there that helps people understand the reason why they're currently in a queue, or the reason why they have to do things in a certain way, and why do I have that on an aircraft?
I think it's a great idea. I might make that suggestion to a couple of folks that could execute it, because I really like that idea. You mentioned it once before. And let me offer you 2 points. The first one is, and I got this question all the time about pricing, right?
Yeah.
In front of audiences, where you're audience giving a speech, and they say, well, why is the pricing this? And I said, let me make this very simple. Here's what the consumer wants. They want to leave on time, get there on time, get their bags as fast as possible, and be alive and fly for free. And fly for free. So that's where the consumer starts. Okay.
Yeah.
So then we got to whittle it down from there and say, well, wait a minute, what makes the most sense? The second part of this puzzle, which I unsuccessfully pushed very hard before Congress, and I put it in my magazine articles at Aloha and at AirCal, was the taxes that the consumer pays that he has no idea. 15, 18, sometimes 20% of your ticket goes to the feds. All different fees. Some of those fees are supposed to improve the air traffic control systems. Guess what? All those funds have been diverted to social programs, to whatever. I'm not talking from a political point of view. I'm just talking factually that those funds go into the federal government and they don't go to where they're supposed to go. And the consumer has no idea that 15 to 20% of that fee is going to the feds for whatever the feds decide, even though they're supposed to do it for aviation It doesn't always happen that way.
Yep.
I think there's a disconnect, and it's very, very hard to get through the noise and to get people's attention in a simple way. See, you and I see these things, it's already in our head, and we can articulate it fairly easily because we understand how to connect the dots to the end result. We need to figure out a way to make that, and maybe your idea is the best, some way of explaining it in a fashion that the average consumer passenger looks there and says, oh, I get it. Whether it's the unbundling of fares, because it's theoretically fair.
Yep.
I mean, are you going to go to Macy's? Are you going to go to
Exactly.
Gimbals? Are you go?
Yep.
And are you going to buy a steak at?
Or do you go before Christmas? Yeah.
It's the consumer choice. What's happened over the years is technology has allowed consumer decision making to be as good as it's ever been.
Yeah.
Go up on the screen and you can decide if you want to pay $5 more. You can sit more in the front on Aer Lingus and get on there first. You get an aisle seat versus a window. You have choices, time of day.
Yeah.
And the websites, British, I think, does a great job. So does as America. There's a lot of it over the years have evolved into really, really excellent choices for the average consumer online.
Oh yeah, 100%.
And you get there and say, well, push this one, this one. British will show you 7 days and say, if you leave on Tuesday on the same screen, 200 on Tuesday, 300 on Wednesday, 400 on Thursday.
Yep.
So the consumer has gained a lot over the years because of technology, and I would say good marketing by management and savvy leadership amongst the airlines. And again, credit is not given to the extent that I think it fairly should.
Yeah, and we're on the crest of a wave now again of even more innovation and technology and improvements. I think the next couple of years or the next 5 years are going to be incredible. Whether it comes from touchless, whether it comes from different type of baggage issues, all sorts. The business is not going to be the same. And please God, we'll both be able to have a look back in 5 years' time and say, do you remember when we were waiting for what might happen? Now we can look back on it, and it's going to be an exciting 5 years.
You mentioned, Chris, the baggage. Let me give you an example of technology and baggage. Back in the early days, you checked in your bag, they put a tag on it. It went through the system, and then it went down internally in the bag room, and it went to a spur. A guy pushed a button to say which spur it was going to go into. A human being, he could have put it in the wrong spur, by the way. Then the guy sticks it in a container. Container goes off to the container that's going to Japan, except the guy's going to London.
Yeah.
So over the years, technology has improved the tracking system. If you'll notice, when bags are being put on airplanes now, they've got barcodes, right?
Yeah.
The guy at the bottom, FedEx started this years ago, reads the bag tag. So they know that your bag is on that airplane because it went up the conveyor belt. And then now they can track it. And you can track your bag electronically online.
Yeah.
So the reduction in baggage losses and mishandlings has dropped dramatically, but nobody talks about it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I just feel now's the time for the industry, because the whole world has watched and has been surprised and has been astonished and has been impressed by what's happened, with air and all modes of transport and all frontline. But the logistics now is such an in thing. Next generations, people in schools now, they need to know about all the different types of jobs and different trades and different specialist areas that you can have associated with aviation and associated with every single aircraft that takes off and lands. It's a wonderful opportunity now to almost sell itself by just explaining to people the whys and not just what happens when something is not as you would see it or be pleased by it. I think we've got a great opportunity.
Another adjunct to that, which a friend of mine, Charlie Martin, who's now into leadership speeches and training, Charlie came up years ago with this concept when he was running the ramp in Los Angeles. So he had like 1,000 employees, and I took over when he left. And he had a 20-minute schooling.
Yeah.
And all the ramp people had to come in a certain time, and he explained to them the P&L, the
Yeah.
profit and loss statement.
Yeah.
Simple terms, what I call Dick and Jane.
Yeah. Yeah.
Here's how the price is, here's the cost, here's the P&L, here's what happens. Because this theory about managers making so much money, the airline's making money in union negotiations, they're asking for this, they're asking for that. But most of them don't really understand how a balance sheet works and how you leverage a balance sheet and the simple things in a P&L. And these are the people on the ground that can influence some of those factors, but they don't understand.
Yeah.
So getting to your point today, which is a very valid point, I got to figure out a way to explore this more, and I'll give you all the credit in the world. Well, maybe, I don't know. I'll have to think about that, but you know what I mean? Some way of saying, to key people, see, y'all have a story.
Yeah.
And it's a good story, and it's never told.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. I just think it would make, it'd be such a lovely thing to let people in schools and everybody on the plane, and if they've watched enough films or their favorite shows, or they've done enough of their own presentations and work, just to sit there and think, I never knew that. And it could be segment by segment by segment. I just think it'd be great. So it's a great industry, Dave, and it's one that, I know you've enjoyed, and I'm enjoying reading about your stories and experiences now in the book. And I think we have to come to the end of this particular session, although we could probably talk between us all day and all night, I would imagine.
I think so.
But the next session, chapter 7, is going to be navigating rules and regulations, which is a really, really good chapter. So I'm looking forward to that again in a couple of weeks' time. And as always, thank you so much. And I've got to admit, I'm very envious of your location on this occasion. I know Dublin so well, and especially Malahide. So normally I'm not too fussed about that, but well done. And you're looking great, my friend. You've had a great haircut there. You look very distinguished, and I look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks. And thanks very much again, Dave.
I see you. Take care, Chris.
Yeah. Cheers.